Good morning. Today, as you know, today is the US presidential election. I remember 4 years ago, I had a class, the same class, study of political process. And so student couldn't concentrate on my lecture. Student watch the mobile phone and iPad to see the result of US presidential election. But last year, so afternoon class, they made the fourth period. And so results already decided. Donald Trump won. So the student seemed very emotional. And so I stopped the lecture and start discussion about the US presidential election. What happened under the Donald Trump? But the student very emotional. So the democracy is ended, and the US politics collapsed. But I talked. Please calm down. I talked, calm down. And so, no, of course, Donald Trump maybe seems very dangerous. He will try to destroy the democracy. However, I'd like to explain the separation of powers, maybe Donald Trump power, Donald Trump decision. Donald Trump policy would be restricted by the Congress and judiciary. It of course happens. Congress sometimes often reject the Donald Trump idea. So firstly, Donald Trump try to appoint his friends or his close allies as executive members. However, Congress rejected some. And also the Donald Trump pet policy, of course, immigration, restricting the immigration from the Muslim. However, it is rejected by Congress. So Donald Trump used our executive order, but it is also rejected by the judiciary. So Donald Trump, of course, realized the many things. In particular, the international politics. International society is completely changed. In particular, the China-US relationship, and also the China-Russia-US relationship. And also, Korean Peninsula issue is very dramatically changed. US-Japan alliance is not changed. Of course, Abe Shinzo is a best friend with Donald Trump in the political field. Abe Shinzo played golf for 2 days. Abe Shinzo entertained Donald Trump. Abe Shinzo bring the Donald Trump to the Japanese izakaya, okay, and the sushi bar. Donald Trump really enjoys the Japanese food. But what happened to Japan-US diplomatic relationship? Are there any change? Just the entertainment. Okay, Shinzo is very good guy. Okay, excellent. Other leaders, not only authoritarian, but also the Western countries, criticize Donald Trump because it's not democratic. The US, Donald Trump tried to destroy the trade rule, free trade rule, criticize Emmanuel Macron, fight with Donald Trump, also Angela Merkel as well. Of course, yes, Theresa May, former British Prime Minister, criticized Donald Trump. So the relationship between Europe and the US become bad. But Japan-US relationship is very good. It's historically best. Some correspondent, some pundit evaluate US-Japan alliance is pretty good. However, is it good? Nothing happened between the US-Japan alliance. So what happened after this presidential election? Joe Biden will win? And what happened between Japan-US alliance? historically, Democrats and Japan relations, LDP, Japan's LDP relations is not so good. Under the Bill Clinton, it's very bad. Barack Obama don't like Shinzo. Okay, don't like Shinzo. Didn't like Shinzo. So what happened? Sometimes Pandit pointed out, Democrats is very, very close to China, People Republic of China, more than Japan. So what happened after the visit? But maybe today, the result is result of presidential election won't be completed. Maybe very, very big confusion happened after the election. Now that I checked the Yahoo News or something, and Indonesia, Indiana State, Donald Trump won. Congratulations. On the other hand, in other states, Biden won. So what happened? Very close competition now. Very exciting situation. Anyway, so but today's talk is an executive. So this is related to the presidential election. Of course, 4 years ago I explained the separation of power. Today is a very coincidentally, I'd like to explain the executive and the separation of power. And I'd like to tell the presidential system. So please enjoy the lecture. Anyway, it's a very good timing. It's just it's not my strategy, just coincidentally. Anyway, so study of the executives. Yes, please see the question. And then the executive is a core of the government. Its member is a president, for example, the prime minister, the ministers, and the cabinet is it's called executives. The role of executive is maybe don't need to explain. So the role of the executive is to government to decide. Government decision, not a good English. And so I'd like to tell the role of executive, the government's energizing force, setting priorities, mobilizing support, lead to the problem, solving crisis, making decisions, oversees the execution. Historically in Japan, the executive power is very weak. Very weak. The prime minister leadership problem is historically Japan's serious problem. One of the Japan's serious problem is a lack of prime ministerial leadership. Okay? But it's a change. As you know, in the world, Abe Shinzo, former prime minister, very evaluated as a strong leader. It's very exceptional. Before Abe, in Japan, from the 2007 to 2012, there's so many prime ministers existed. Abe Shinzo, first Abe government, Abe was very young, handsome, very obochama politician. Obochama is a very high people from the high class society. Abe became prime minister. Very, very ikemen politician. Ikemen, I don't know. As but 1 year later, after just 1 year, Abe's term, just 1 year, 2007, Abe quit, resigned. And then it's very difficult for me to memorize the Japan prime minister. I'm a political scientist, but it's very difficult to memorize. Okay, Abe Shinzo, first Abe Shinzo, the Fukuda Yasuo. Maybe nobody know except the Japanese people. Who is Fukuda Yasuo? Fukuda Yasuo. And Fukuda was a former chief cabinet secretary of Koizumi government. Koizumi. Maybe you know Koizumi Junichiro. It's a very lion hairstyle. It's a very, very, very samurai face. very small eye, not fat guy. It's opposite to me, fat guy. Right? And so yes, Koizumi Junichiro very famous. And Koizumi Junichiro, Fukuda Yasuo, Asotaro. Maybe somebody know if you are interested in Japanese politics. Yes, finance minister now. Asotaro, the former prime minister, now the finance minister. Yes, and so they also resigned within 1 year. And there's a Democratic Party have had power. LDP lost. And Hatoyama Yukio, prime minister, Hatoyama Yukio, is a very, very rich guy. Very, very rich family. Hatoyama Yukio. And so then the Kannaoto, he's from very poor family. It's opposite to Hatoyama. So the Kannaoto. And so the Noda Yoshihiko, very, very young prime minister. And so Noda Yoshihiko. Then it's returned to LDP and Abe Shinzo returned to the prime minister. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. From 2000 to 2006 to 2020. Within 6 years, 6 prime minister. So nobody knows the prime minister has. Abe Shinzo is different. Because everybody knows Abe. Everybody knows Abe. Konnichiwa, Abe Shinzo desu ne. It's very easy to perform as Abe. Konnichiwa, Abe desu. It's under control. My Abenomics. Very easy. But I cannot catch the characteristics of Suga. No characteristics. Suga has no characteristics. Very difficult. Suga. Maybe you can't. But if you are interested in Japanese politics, maybe you know the face of Suga. Of course, she was a former chief cabinet secretary. So he had, as a chief cabinet secretary, he had a press conference every day. Made it spread to the world, not only Japan, but also the world. Yes, as you know, I am a secretary of foreign minister in China. I know the face of the secretary. Yes, I don't know the name. She had press conference every day. China sometimes strong lady criticize the USA and Japan sometimes. Sometimes she criticizes Japan. Japan should directly think about Japan's bad history. Okay, so I know the spokesman of the China Foreign Secretary Ministry. It's the same. Maybe everybody in the world knows Suga's face. Suga had a press conference every day. Anyway, so the Abe exception now is that Japan, the executive power becomes stronger and stronger. It's a result of the reform. Maybe it's historically Japan's serious problem, but Japanese politics is reformed, and so the cabinet office has very, very strong power. Now, as you know, maybe Japan's freedom of academics is very, very in the difficult situation. Because the cabinet office put strong pressure on the academics, universities. So maybe somebody criticized Japan's cabinet office too strong, have too strong power. Anyway, so it's just a study. Please think about the distinguish between the political executive and the bureaucracy. What is executive? Executive is different from the bureaucracies. Executive role is to make policy, and the bureaucracy is to put policy into effect. The role is a bit different. And so the member of executives in democracy is chosen by the political means mainly the election. And of course, a member of executive can be removed by the people through the election. And of course, bureaucracy are not chosen by election. Of course, bureaucracy maybe is took an exam, in Japanese system, and maybe the Chinese system is similar. Bureaucracy is selected through the examination. In Japanese case, almost all bureaucrats, the majority of bureaucrats is graduate of Tokyo University. Maybe have the first class bureaucrat examination, to select the first class bureaucrats, elite bureaucrats, and passed and become the bureaucrats. It's not by the election. So sometimes Japanese politics is called bureaucrat dominance. But bureaucrat dominance is not democratic because they are not elected. So sometimes it's criticized. Is Japan a democratic country? Yes, of course, Soviet Union, the four Russian people, Russian leader, evaluate Japan, or Japan as one of the most successful communist nation in the world. Not communist, no, most successful socialist nation in the world. We Japanese people don't want to agree with Russian evaluation. Anyway, so one more confusion. Maybe the head of the state and the head of the government. One of the confusion for it. Head of the state and head of the government. Head of the state is most famous head of the state is Queen Elizabeth II, maybe. Most famous head of the state in the world, Queen Elizabeth II. Japanese emperor is also famous, but the Japanese emperor is not head of state. In the Japanese constitution, head of not the Japanese. In the Japanese constitution, Japanese emperor is regulated as a symbol of Japan. What is the symbol of Japan? Very difficult. Why USA? USA made the Japan's constitution. However, why USA general headquarters are regulated Japan's emperor as a symbol? It's a very difficult process. So, of course, because maybe Japanese emperor have some, I don't know, some responsibility for the World War II, maybe. Japanese emperor is not the actual power in the World War II, of course. Military. And the military elite used the emperor. So the emperor had no actual power. Emperor exerted power just one time. Emperor decided to finish the World War II. This is the only time when Japanese Emperor Showa means Hirohito, exerts power. But basically, Japanese emperor have no power. It's been completely controlled by military. However, Japanese emperor is of course head of state and military used. So the USA and the Japanese new government at that time tried to exclude the emperor from the politics. So Japanese emperor is regulated as a symbol, but actually Japanese emperor have a head of state role. For example, Japanese emperor formally appoint prime minister, and other role is Japanese emperor accept the foreign head of office, head of state. And entertain, for example, the Donald Trump come and have a dinner with emperor. Emperor, and have a good wine and good food and very, very good food, enjoy the food, and entertain other country head of state. It's a head of state role. So maybe other country think Japan's head of state is of course a Japanese emperor. Maybe the other countries say, but in the Japanese people think he's not the head of state. He's just a symbol of Japan. It's very difficult to say. Anyway, so the head of state role is non-political, theoretically non-political and ceremonial role. Ceremonial role. So yes, of course, British Queen Elizabeth II appointed Boris Johnson as a prime minister, but it's just a ceremonial role. Of course, UK Parliament decided, selected the prime minister, and then UK Parliament suggests, recommend the new prime minister to the Queen Elizabeth, and the Queen appointed formally. It is just a ceremonial role, no political decision. And so the head of the government is, of course, simply to say, prime minister, first minister of government. First minister. Germany it is called the chancellor. The first minister of government is the head of the government. Head of government, the prime minister have a responsibility to manage the government. And of course, prime minister selected in the parliament. Maybe the parliament is a majority party. Leader of majority party become the prime minister. So the prime minister needs the support of the citizen. Prime minister needs support of the citizen. Of course. So the prime minister have a responsibility for citizen. Okay. Supporter, voter, how can I say it? People, have responsibility of the people. This is different. Of course, sometimes head of states also elected, directly elected by the people. It is called, they are called president. President. So, but the head of state's role is basically ceremonial. But how about presidential system? Of course, in the presidential system, such as USA, the 通常 president have the 通常 as a head of state and head of government. Head of government. Of course, US president have both political role and ceremonial role. Both function, have the both function. On the other side, parliamentary system is, of course, in the some parliamentary system, the president exists like Germany, Italy, other European countries, the parliamentary system. However, they have the elected president. However, president role is very restricted, just a ceremonial role as a constitutional monarchy. It's similar to the constitutional monarchy. Queen Elizabeth and Japan's emperor, same. But the prime minister, chancellor is the head of the government. And on the other hand, the head of the state role is just a ceremonial role. It is a different. Okay. In the presidential system, the head of state, president have two roles, head of state and the head of government. It is interesting. So the head of state is maybe the higher position than the head of the government. So do you know the G7 summit? G7 summit, of course, なんていうの、記念撮影 in the English, photo session. It's very photo session is very interesting. The head of the state is a higher position, higher status than head of the government. So, of course, central position is a US president. Congratulations. And the left side, I don't know left side or right side. Second position is a French president. Okay, their president. Then, opposite side is maybe it's a status of a country. State of a country. Left side, okay, Trump, Macron. Other side is Johnson, Boris, UK. Okay, UK. And also then Italy, Canada. アメリカ何を忘れてる。G7 ね。And also, how about Japan? Of course, there is a basic position is far east or far right. Far east or far left or far right position. Japan Prime Minister maybe is a small guy. Yeah? There is a very, very long distance from Trump, US president. Okay? This is the basic position of Japan. I don't know, in Japan is not a Western country, so the Japan status may be relatively low. Of course, Japan have a superpowers, of course, economic giant, so maybe Japan should have more higher position, but high status. However, maybe politically, maybe the Japanese voice is very weak, unfortunately. Anyway, so the Prime Minister Nakasone, 1980s, Nakasone is one of the new neoliberal leader in the world. Nakasone tried to get the central position in the photo session. Tried. Nakasone thought, okay, Nakasone, sorry, you don't know Nakasone, but for Japanese people, Nakasone is a very, very famous prime minister. Maybe maybe you know the JR and NTT, if you know. Yes, Japan's big country enterprise. But JR, do you know JR was and the NTT was a national corporation, public corporation, historically. However, Nakasone is the same generation as Margaret Thatcher or Ronald Reagan, neoliberal leader. Nakasone realized the privatization of NTT and JR. If you listen this history, you understand. Nakasone, very, very great prime minister. JR and NTT, maybe 1, 2 of the Japan's most excellent enterprise. However, they are private by Nakasone. Of course, as you know, Koizumi Junichiro privatized the postal service. It's a great achievement. However, maybe Nakasone's achievement is more greater than Koizumi. So the Nakasone tried to get the central position. So the Nakasone discussed with his brain. His brain is an actor. One of the brains is an actor, famous actor. Famous actor suggests Nakasone, just before the session, please ask Reagan. Of course, naturally, Reagan and Thatcher discussed. It's an Iron Lady. Nakasone tried to walk to the Reagan. Hi, Ron. Hi, Ron. Hi, 取ります。カシャカシャカシャ。で、Nakasone get the central position. Historically, this is the first time for Japanese prime minister to get the central position in the G7 summit. Just hi, Ron. Of course, communication ability is very important for Japanese people. I'd like to say, Japanese people, student, a lot of time about this history. Communication. Hi, Ron. Hi, Margaret. Konnichiwa. Nakasone get the central position. Maybe relatively, Abe could get the near central position because Abe very famous. Abe is a veteran in the G7. Veteran position, Abe G7. Abe could speak English, can speak English very well because Abe have overseas studies. UCLA, Abe studied in the UCLA, not graduate, just study. So Abe is relatively tall, taller than as a Japanese prime minister. Abe taller than me. Maybe I seem a very big guy, maybe, right? But I'm 173 centimeters tall, 173. And so Abe is over 175. Relatively big Japanese prime minister. Suga is very small guy. Suga is very small guy. And so Abe wear the Italian suits every day. Abe have the Omega Speed Master. Abe is very fashionable style. Okay? Very rich guy, この野郎. Anyway, so yes, in Japan, prime minister is very, very weak, but Nakasone tried to get higher status, politically higher status. Economically, Japan is giant, but politically very weak, and middle class country, and politically so try to get. Anyway, it's just a history. And those are three types of executives. Yes, I'd like to say that difference between the parliamentary system, presidential system. Yes, Chinese character, Gi in Nakasone, it's Japanese. I don't know how to pronounce in Chinese. I don't know. A parliamentary system. It's a parliamentary system. Is a authority. Prime minister have the authority, actual power. Head of the government have the actual power. The prime minister is selected in the parliament. Of course, leader of majority party becomes the prime minister normally, but sometimes small party leader becomes the prime minister. I don't know why. In Japan, sometimes a small party leader becomes the prime minister. He forms a coalition government. Coalition is a small party and some party gather and form the government. And so, of course, parliamentary system, the Japan, UK, Germany is a parliamentary system. Of course, the name of parliament is different. In UK, the parliament, but in Japan, it's called the national diet. National diet. And the parliamentary system, of course, other system, the presidential system is sometimes the USA, Latin American countries, South Korea, the presidential system. And third type, the semi-presidential system, is a system between the parliamentary system and the presidential. It means that both president and the prime minister have actual power. Actual power. It's a semi-presidential system. It's France and Russia. In France, sometimes president and the prime minister is a different party. Big case is historically it's the biggest, most famous case is president is François Mitterrand, the Socialist Party. On the other hand, the prime minister Jacques Chirac is a Gaullist, it means the Conservative Party. It's two big politicians get the highest position. Of course, two strong politicians, but it's an opposite party, so very, very confusion. However, if the two big politicians shake hands, the friends get a strong power. It's a very, very famous case. Jacques Chirac. Of course, Jacques Chirac becomes the president. So, of course, one of the most famous presidents in the French history. Jacques Chirac and Mitterrand is divided the power. It's the same presidential system. And also, Russian Federation is the same presidential system. Now, it's president, prime minister changed. I don't know. Russia. Of course, President Vladimir Putin, and also former president become the prime minister, Medvedev. Mr. Medvedev was prime minister. So the semi-presidential system is very interesting case. Anyways, I'd like to explain the parliamentary system. Yes, Japan is a typical case. Characters, the dispersion separation power. Yes, it's a democratic system, so the separation power is very important between the parliament, administration, and judiciary. Separation power is very important, but government needs a competence parliament. It means that, as I said, as prime minister is selected in the by the parliamentary vote. The parliamentary member of parliament vote and decide the prime minister. So the prime minister is strongly supported by the ruling party. And also the prime minister have a right to dissolve the parliament. Of course, sometimes Prime Minister rules the majority. It's a very rare case, but sometimes Prime Minister rules the majority. And not only opposition, but also the ruling party sometimes reject the Prime Minister's policy. For example, in Japanese case, the tax increase. Tax increase is rejected by not only opposition party, but also ruling party. Sometimes, in such a case, Prime Minister try to dissolve the parliament and have the election and try to get the majority again in the parliament, Prime Minister. So Prime Minister can dissolve the parliament. And the head of state is just a ceremonial role, as I said many times. The Japanese emperor knows, konnichiwa, the New Year Day. I pray the Japanese people's happiness. Congratulations, bye bye. This is a ceremonial Prime Minister. This is a very important. なんつうのこれ。こんにちは。天皇。That's a ceremonial role. It is interesting that the British case. British case, Queen's speech. Do you know the Queen's speech in the British Parliament? British Parliament, government policy is explained by the Queen. As I said last week, in Japan, Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide addressed in the Japanese national diet to explain the policy, new policy. However, in the British Parliament, Prime Minister never explained the policy. Queen beat the Parliament. Of course, upper house only, not the House of Commons, House of Peers only, and come and address, explain policy. My government implement the new policy. My government implement the coronavirus countermeasures. My government implement. It's a House of Peers. It is interesting. Prime Minister have no seat in the House of Peers. Can you understand? House of Peers. Prime Minister just stand. No seat. Of course, Prime Minister is not an aristocrat. Okay, it does stand. Member of cabinet just stand up and listen to the Queen's speech. My government implements new economic policy. Sorry, it's like Queen Elizabeth II. The Prime Minister just okay. But actually, of course, British government write speech, Queen's speech. Boris Johnson government wrote the Queen's speech. Queen did. My government implements Queen did. But Prime Minister just stand up and okay, just okay, good, go. It's just a ceremony. Very interesting. Queen's speech is just a ceremony. Queen just reads the speech. Government, of course, decides the policy. Queen reads the speech. Is it actually what meaning? It's just a ceremony. Please understand the ceremonial role. Queen's speech. British Queen's speech. Maybe please watch the YouTube of the British Queen's speech. My government implement. Anyway, so the cabinet have the actual administrative authority. Mutual relations between the parliament and the cabinet. Very important. Check and balance. So the check and balance is sometimes don't function because of course a majority of parliament is of course same party as the prime minister. So the British system maybe the check and balance function very weak in the parliament. However, British parliament function is, of course, the deliberation, most important. Deliberation is very important. Most particular case is Prime Minister's question time. It's held in every Wednesday afternoon. Today, so afternoon. Queen's speech is interesting, but also the question time is very important. Directly discuss between the Prime Minister and the opposition leader. Directly discuss. It's a very, very tough discussion. Tougher than the Biden-Trump discussion, maybe. Very, very, every week. Maybe so, maybe sometimes opposition leader and prime minister become friends, actually. Every week. So the prime minister becomes, yes. But every day time, so it's almost all hate speech. Almost all hate speech. It's a joking, British joke. And not policy, discuss policy, but it seems almost all hate speech. And so, very interesting. So please watch the YouTube, the Prime Minister's question time. Very so not check out, but British citizens watch the question time and read the newspaper and judge in the next election. Next election, maybe in the parliamentary system, in the next election, maybe if government failed, and maybe government is replaced by the election. Anyway, so the and type of parliamentary government is a very, I don't know, three types. Cabinet government, the cabinet have a strong power. Finland, very difficult to say about Finland. Finland State Council cabinet is a very, very strong power. And Prime Minister is the chairman of the cabinet meeting. And Prime Minister is, of course, checked by the parliament. Because in the Finnish government is a coalition government, so small party have power. So the strong leadership of cabinet and prime minister is sometimes restricted by the coalition government. Also, coalition government is so that not only the ruling party, but also the small parties will, like, for example, typical case is the environmental issue, for example, about the environmental issue or the social security. Maybe the small party's opinion is reflected by the government. So the cabinet, the second type of prime minister government is maybe typical case in Germany, but also in UK, also prime minister government. Prime minister have very strong power. Of course, Angela Merkel is a very, very strong leader in that Germany. And also that it's the same as the first type. The Germany is, of course, the multi-party system. So the government is formed by the coalition. Small party have power also. So the chancellor's power is checked by the coalition government, coalition party. So that, of course, as you know, in Germany, the Green Party is very famous. And the Free Democrats is a very, very famous. It's interesting that in Germany, from West Germany, and Germany, the foreign minister is the same people had been foreign minister for over 20 years. Government changed. Government was a conservative Christian Democrats. It changed to the Social Democrats. Now returned to the Christian Democrats. But German political coalition. So that if the ruling big party changed, a party includes the government, Free Democrats. The Free Democrat leader share the foreign minister position. So if government change from liberal to conservative, conservative liberal, foreign policy is the same. Foreign minister, same person. Only two persons share the foreign minister for over 20 years. The freedom. It's a problem of coalition government, of course. Small party have a strong power. stronger power. In Japanese case, the Komeito, the Buddhist party have power. Buddhist party share the Minister of Construction position for 10 over 10 years in the Abe government and before the Abe government and the Koizumi government also Komeito share, Komeito dominate the Minister of Construction. It's a Minister of Construction. It's very easy to spread the money to the supporter. The problem. I understand it is one of the reasons why Japan faces Japan's budget deficit increase. One of the reasons the coalition, small partner, have a strong power and distribute money to the supporters, the regional side. It is one of the problem. Anyway, so the German politics, the chancellor have a strong power, but sometimes it's restricted by the small parties. And third type in Japan, ministerial government, maybe simply to say, each minister have power. So the prime minister cannot control the ministers and the ministry. Prime minister cannot control the other ministers sometimes. Those control. Decentralized. Cabinet office, inside the cabinet office, power in the cabinet office is decentralized. Minister is a first, powerful figure in the ministry, not the member of parliament. Member of parliament, but they don't, prime minister cannot control. It is a process. Of course, this is of course a reform. Now the prime minister has very strong power. It's changed. Japan seems changed to the prime minister government now. But historically, Japan is a very prime ministerial type. And the prime minister is just a chairman of cabinet meeting. Just a chairman cabinet meeting. No actual power. Is a very, very Japan's characteristics. Why Japan, the prime minister power is very weak? Because of course it's because of the history maybe. In Japan, the strong leadership is Japanese citizen was tend to hate the strong leadership because Japan have a bad history of the militarism and the elites. Elite have a strong power. Maybe it's people cannot control that. Japan lost historically. Japan lost the democratic control. So Japan tried to restrict the prime minister power and strong leadership in the Japanese society. Japanese people basically don't like the strong leadership in the organization. Maybe it's maybe the history. Japanese people still have a bad memory, but maybe the young generation, our generation maybe don't know the history. So our generation, the young generation, for example, university students, try to accept the strong prime minister. It's a very big change. But fine, basically, as I said, it's very in Japan. Prime minister part very, very limited by many things. Powerful bureaucracy, upper legislative chamber, the upper house is very strong. Yes, it's a former aristocrat house. Upper house is very strong. Political party faction is very strong. Other party leaders, of course, opposition parties have also power. So the consensus style. Japanese people prefer consensus style. So the prime minister has power is very, very restricted by so much factors. This is a Japanese system. Anyway, so the presidential system is I lost some time, but the presidential system is a narrow definition is of course president have two roles. As I said, head of state and head of government. This is a narrow definition. Presidential system. USA, Brazil, Mexico, Kazakhstan, Iran, Afghanistan, Indonesia, Sudan, Peru, Chile, Argentina, Philippines, South Korea. Of course, examples are narrow definition of prime minister, the presidential system. President. Of course, wider definition is of course country who have prime president is a presidential system. This is a broad definition. Of course, it includes Germany, Italy. Italy, Germany is theoretically the parliamentary system. Government, UK, government Italy have president, but it's just a ceremonial role. The president doesn't have the head of government role. This is a parliamentary system, but in the broader definition, this is a presidential system. Okay, so but basically we adopt the narrow definition. This is a presidential system. And so the difference between the presidential system and the characterized presidential system comparing with parliamentary system. Of course, presidential system separation part very strong, completely separated. As I said, so the Donald Trump, for example, Donald Trump power is very restricted by the Congress and the judiciary many times. On the other hand, parliamentary system, the administration, the government is strongly connected with the parliament. Of course, as I said, prime minister selected in the ruling party. The separation of power is ambiguous. The head of administrative body is the president. The head of government. Head of government is president. But in the parliamentary system, prime minister is the head of the state government. The prime minister manages the government. And the presidential system, the president directly manages the government. This is different. Right to dissolve the parliament. It's of course, as I said, the prime minister has the power, right to dissolve the parliament. On the other hand, president cannot dissolve the parliament. In the U.S. case, of course, or U.S. case, in the midterm election, now the president is a Republican, but the parliament majority, Democrat become the parliament majority. It is called a divided government. Divided government. However, president, U.S. president cannot dissolve the parliament to shuffle the member. Shuffle the member cannot, because it's a separation power. Separation power. One more important thing is that U.S. president cannot submit the bill to the Congress. Cannot. Because member of Congress, only member of Congress submit the new policy, new law to the Congress. This is a separation power. And also the relation with the parliament is minister in the parliamentary system, prime minister can secure the majority seat in parliament. So on the other hand, as I said, the president often faces the risk of divided government. So maybe you have the strong image of U.S. president, maybe. So that many people think presidential system, president has stronger power than prime minister in parliamentary system. But it's just an image. Actually, prime minister in the parliamentary system have more stronger power than president. Because prime minister has secured majority, so it's a very stable position. On the other hand, the president sometimes face, in particular, the U.S. case, the domestic policy. About the domestic policy, U.S. presidents often face the risk that Congress would reject the bill. Most typical cases maybe the Obamacare session. President Barack Obama tried to introduce Obamacare as a national, it's a system of national health system. However, Obama faced a very difficult situation. Not only Republican, but also Democrats hesitate to introduce such a system. Maybe, I don't know. I cannot understand, sometimes I cannot understand the American democracy. However, so in particular, Republicans thought it's not a democratic system. I don't know. So in the other country, the national health service is very usual. As you know, in Japan, the national health service is highly evaluated. However, now Donald Trump criticized the UAKMHS and Japan National Health Service. It's it's very bad policy as a free trade. I don't know. So Donald Trump attack. Maybe if Donald Trump is re-elected, Donald Trump definitely attack the UK National NHS, National Health NHS service, and Japan's national health system. Maybe it's a trade deal. Very unfortunate. Maybe Joe Biden won't attack. Joe Biden won't attack. It's very interesting. So, but not only US, UK, but also Japan, Germany, Congress session very stable, basically. Very stable position. And Prime Minister can pass through their policy through the parliament very easily. So the Prime Minister has a very strong power. My understanding is that most strongest political leader in the world is maybe British Prime Minister. British Prime Minister. Of course, international society, British Prime Minister power is very, very shrinked. However, in the domestic politics, in terms of domestic politics, maybe British Prime Minister are the very strongest. Even now, Boris Johnson is very populist and very crazy, seems crazy. However, he has very strong power, of course. Also, Japanese Prime Minister power is also increased now. Increased, very increased. Of course, Liberal Democrat power secure power for over 60 years. Strongest political party in the democratic world. As I said, strongest party in the democratic world. So, German Prime Minister's stable position is a very, very strongest in the world, one of the strongest in the world, maybe. Japanese Prime Minister is very, very stable position, stable power in the domestic issue. So please understand, so separation of power and sometimes presidential face a divided government. So it may be different from the general image. So please understand academically. Academically, theoretically, parliamentary system is stronger, more stable than presidential system. Generally, it's a very important point. So how about the semi-presidential system is it's a system to combine the elected president and the appointed prime minister. President usually appoints the prime minister and can dissolve the legislature. The president usually serves a little number of fixed term lengths. Prime Minister and cabinet are accountable to both president and legislation. Yes, Russia and France is this system. Basically, president engaged the diplomacy. And Prime Minister engaged the domestic issue. This is a different because Prime Minister have a leader of the majority party in the National Congress in France. So in the domestic issue, basically Prime Minister have a very strong power. On the other hand, President is of course a French face in the international society. So this is a basic division of the role between the president and the prime minister. Same presidential. I don't know if it's a good system or not. Russian system is maybe the basic theoretically semi-presidential system, but of course the president have a strong power than prime minister. And so finally, I'd like to say the executive, the authoritarian state is basically the typical case is okay, Russia and People's Republic of China. Authoritarian leader have more power. Actual power is stronger than formal power. Actual power is stronger for force. And so authoritarian state, the personal power is important than the institution. Sometimes authoritarian leader change the rule of the formal rule. And of course, formal rule exists. It's like a democratic rule, like the typical case in Russia. But sometimes president appoints his friend as an executive position, and so excludes the enemy, and so that gradually change the rule. It's so the personal rule is very important. In Japan, sometimes the prime minister try to change the formal rule. I don't know. Sometimes now Japan seems more authoritarian style. I don't know. Very difficult to say. So the personal rule is very important than the formal institution. This is maybe authoritarian. Yes, authoritarian say, claimed, we are democratic. We are democratic. Of course, Russian Federation as well, of course. And also, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. North Korea. Yes, we are democratic. We are the nation of labor class. Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Kudoi in Japanese. So Japan is just Japan. So Japan is very ambiguous. Japan sometimes authoritarian style, but Japan sometimes democratic. So very ambiguous. Japan is just Japan. Very simple country name, Japan. On the other hand, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It's democratic. It's people for people. Republic? I don't know. Anyway, so formally we are democratic. However, rule is changeable. Leader make actual rule. These are authoritarian states. Russia is, of course, a president operate without a constitutional restraint. But Vladimir Putin. The very interesting is that Putin had no choice but to step down as president upon the completion of his second term in 2008. Yes, constitutionally regulated. Putin had to resign in 2008. Okay, congratulations, bye-bye, sayonara. However, he continued to hold power after 2008. He became the prime president. Then he became the prime minister. He appointed, actually, not formally, actually appointed his junior, Mr. Dmitry Medvedev, become the president. But maybe Medvedev is completely controlled by Prime Minister Putin. Then Putin returned the president in 2012. It's followed the formal rule. And Medvedev changed to the prime minister. And Putin will be able to have a power until 2024. Very typical example. And now is that Putin tried to amend the constitution to have a power eternally. Very interesting situation. Putin tried to reform the constitution democratically. Of course, leader tried to have an eternal power under the democratic system. It's a historically big example is Hitler. Nazi Germany is Hitler Hitler get all power. He get power democratically in the democratic government. in the democratic parliament. It's very, I don't know, Putin is a dictator or not. However, Putin is appointed as the president in 2000. So now it's 2020. So for over 20 years, Putin shared the power, secured the power for over 20 years, democratically. Very interesting. Other cases are maybe China. Of course, Chinese case is, of course, China has a parliament. However, Chinese Communist Party have more power than parliament. So the Chinese Communist Party decision is paramount, stronger than Chinese parliament. It's very interesting. Also, in the Chinese constitution, the Chinese Communist Party's paramount position is regulated in the Chinese constitution. Very interesting. And also, yes, and interestingly, the formal position is not so important as a leader of a country. So, how can I say? Of course, you know, big example is Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping is recognized as a paramount leader of China for a long time. However, his most senior post he had held was a party's vice chairman, yes, party's vice chairman and chairman of party's military commission, not the president of China. However, he has a very actual power, most powerful leader. So the Xi Jinping is also the head of Chinese Communist Party, but head of state, maybe, actually. And other example is Kim Jong-un, Democratic People's Republic of China. Kim Jong-un is a chairman of North Korean Labor Party, chairman. However, Kim Jong-un is not the head of the state of North Korea. Head of the state is maybe, not maybe. Head of the state is still Kim Il-sung. He died, of course. A grandfather of Kim Jong-un. However, head of state's position is eternally Kim Il-sung. So in the newspaper, please watch the newspaper. Sometimes it's called, Kim Jong-un is called Chairman Kim, not President Kim. Kim Jong-un will try to be the president maybe in the future. But now his formal position is just a chair of the party, chair of the military. However, he has an actual power. This is one of the characteristics of authoritarian state. I don't know actually maybe, but my understanding is President Xi Jinping is not the head of state formally. He's a head of Communist Party still. So head of state is maybe head of the state. Mao Zedong was the head of the state maybe. However, after Mao Zedong died, the head of state position is abolished, or nobody gets the head of the state position after Mao Zedong. I understand. So the chairman or the leader of Communist Party is the top position in China. This is a very interesting position. So the personal rule or the informal rule is very important in the authoritarian state. Sometimes very, very strong, but sometimes it becomes unstable. It's a very controversial position. controversial point. Please think about it. I don't want to tell the actual answer to the authoritarian state is good or not. Very difficult question. Now is many democratic countries seems authoritarian style, like USA, Japan, UK seems very authoritarian state, populism. So it's very interesting. Please think about it. Any question if you have? Thank you very much. So see you next week. レコーディングを止めた方がいいな。クラウドが整ったと。